The arterial spray wasn't red. It was something else, something closer to the iridescent fluid you find inside a glow stick when you snap it. A viscosity that defied the standard clotting factors I've studied for 20 years as a trauma surgeon. I had my gloves deep inside the thoracic cavity of a creature that shouldn't exist, pressing a lap pad against a rupture near what I assumed was the pericardium, shouting for a clamp that no nurse was there to hand me because I was alone in the debris field of a crash site that smelled like ozone and burning hair. The creature, a classic grey but taller, leaner, its skin like wet slate, grabbed my wrist with a grip that felt like hydraulic steel. I looked into those large, black, void-like eyes and saw not fear but a profound ancient pity. I was trying to save it, my mind racing through ACLS protocols, thinking about volume replacement, thinking I could just run a line from my own brachial artery to its collapsing vein because I'm O-negative, the universal donor, the golden standard. I pulled the tourniquet from my kit, baring my arm, ready to make the connection, ready to be the hero in a story no one would believe. The grey spoke not with a mouth but directly into the center of my skull, a resonant frequency that vibrated my teeth. "Do not," it said, the voice sounding like grinding stones. "Your blood carries the code of redemption. It is a poison to my kind. It would kill us instantly." That was the moment physics broke. That was the moment I realized that everything I learned in medical school, every anatomy textbook, every lecture on cellular biology, was just a nursery rhyme we tell ourselves to feel safe in a universe that hates us. I haven't slept more than 2 hours a night since that Tuesday. I was a man of science, a man of empirical evidence. I drove a Volvo. I paid my taxes. I performed Whipple procedures on pancreatic cancer patients and went home to an empty house that smelled of lemon polish and silence. My wife left 3 years ago because she said I looked at people like they were broken engines waiting to be fixed, and she wasn't wrong. I retreated into the concrete, the technical. I loved the OR because inside the OR there is no ambiguity. There is a problem, there is a procedure, there is a resolution. Cut, suture, heal. I found comfort in the predictable rhythm of the vitals monitor. But out there in the woods, behind my property line, where the trees were snapped like toothpicks and the soil was fused into glass, there was no rhythm. I had been up late, reviewing patient charts for a difficult resection scheduled for the next morning. I heard the sound first, not a crash, but a tearing sound like wet canvas ripping, followed by a pressure wave that cracked the double-paned window in my study. I grabbed my trauma bag. I always keep a fully stocked one, complete with laryngoscopes, endotracheal tubes, and liters of saline, and ran out. The heat was immediate. It wasn't fire, it was radiation, or something mimicking it. My Geiger counterwatch, a little affectation I bought after Fukushima, remained silent, which was technically impossible given the thermal bloom. I found the craft half buried in the loam. It wasn't a saucer. It was a geometric impossibility, a shape that seemed to fold in on itself, defying Euclidean geometry. The pilot had been thrown clear. It was lying in a heap of bracken, its chest heaving with a rhythmic wet rattle. My training took over. Airway, breathing, circulation. I didn't scream, I didn't run. I assessed. I approached the entity. It was roughly 2 meters tall. The anatomy was humanoid but divergent. I saw no external ears, just auditory pits. The chest was caved in on the left side. I knelt in the mud, my knees soaking instantly. I shone my penlight into its eyes. No pupillary response, just an endless, absorbing blackness. I palpated for a pulse. I found one, but not at the carotid. It was lower, near the clavicle, a flutter that felt like a trapped bird, beating at maybe 300 beats per minute. Tachycardic, hypovolemic shock. I needed to stop the bleeding. The wound was a jagged laceration across the thorax. The blood, that glowing viscous fluid, was pulsing out. I applied direct pressure. It felt wrong. The skin was cool, rubbery, like handling a dolphin. I remember thinking about the sterility of the field, worrying about infection, which is absurd in retrospect. The entity convulsed, a spasm of pain. I reached for my trauma shears to cut away the strange, seamless flight suit it wore. The material didn't cut. It parted, retracting as if it sensed the blade. I saw the internal damage. Organs I couldn't name were exposed. I saw something pulsing that looked like a heart, but it had 3 distinct chambers contracting in a syncopated rhythm. I knew I was losing him, or it. I needed to expand volume. I had saline, but saline is just water and salt. It doesn't carry oxygen. He needed hemoglobin. He needed a carrier. That's when I had the idea. I'm a universal donor. My blood is clean. I rolled up my sleeve. I prepped the IV line. I was calm. I was a surgeon doing a job. I was going to perform a direct transfusion, field medicine. The moment the needle touched my skin, the telepathic intrusion happened. It wasn't just a voice, it was a download of sensory data. I felt the creature's agony, its fear of the cold, its desperate mission, and then the refusal. The code of redemption. The phrase hung in the air between us, heavy and smelling of burnt ozone. I froze. Redemption? I asked aloud, my voice sounding small in the dark forest. The entity turned its head. The movement was smooth, hydraulic. Your biology is weaponized with grace, it projected. We are built on logic. Your blood contains the chaotic isotope of forgiveness. It breaks our cellular lattice. I didn't understand. I still don't understand, not fully, but I saw the fear in its eyes. It was terrified of my blood. It would rather die of exsanguination than take a drop of what ran through my veins. I sat back on my heels, the syringe dangling from my hand. The creature's breathing slowed. The flutter in its chest weakened. I watched the light fade from the fluid leaking into the dirt. I felt a sudden, crushing loneliness, worse than the day the divorce papers arrived. This being was dying because I was fundamentally toxic to it, not biologically, but metaphysically. My very essence was a poison to its kind. I tried to stabilize it with pressure again, but the damage was too severe. The glow in the eyes dimmed. The chest ceased its rapid, shallow rise. It died right there under my hands, staring up at a moon that looked indifferent. I sat there for an hour. The woods were silent. No crickets, no wind. Just the cooling corpse of a star traveler and a surgeon who had failed his most important patient. I checked my own pulse. It was steady, 60 beats per minute, normal sinus rhythm. I felt sick. I packed my bag. I didn't call the police. Who would I call? The CDC, the Air Force. They would dissect it. They would dissect me. So I went back to the house. I washed the glowing fluid off my hands. It took 3 scubbings with Hibiclens to get the shimmer off. I looked in the mirror. I looked the same, graying temples, tired eyes, the face of a man who knows too much about how the human body fails. But I felt different. I felt marked. The next morning I went to work. I stood over a patient, a young man with a ruptured spleen from a motorcycle accident. I looked at the blood pooling in his abdominal cavity. Red, iron-rich, human, and I wondered about the code. What did it mean? Was it genetic? Was it spiritual? Was it a mutation? I finished the surgery. The patient lived. I went to the locker room and stared at my hands. I needed to know. I needed a sample. I realized I had left the entity in the woods. I had to go back. I had to secure the site before the wolves or the government found it. I drove home, speeding, breaking every traffic law. I parked the Volvo on the grass and ran back into the tree line. The craft was gone, the debris was gone. The fused glass soil was gone. It was just pine needles and dirt. But the blood was still there, a small shimmering pool soaking into the earth. And in the center of the pool, growing out of the alien fluid, was a flower. A white lily, perfect, impossible, blooming in the middle of a blast zone. I knelt down. I didn't touch it. I took a sample of the soil around it. I took a sample of the dried fluid on a nearby rock. I brought them to my basement lab. I have a microscope there, a good one, an Olympus BX53. I prepared a slide. I looked at the alien blood cells. They were hexagonal, crystalline, and they were moving. They were organizing. They weren't dead. They were building something. I pricked my finger. I added a drop of my own blood to the slide. The reaction was violent. Under the magnification, My red blood cells attacked the hexagonal structures. They didn't phagocytize them. They illuminated them. My cells emitted a burst of photonic energy, and the alien cells shattered. They dissolved. It would kill us. The entity hadn't lied. My blood was a weapon. But why? And why did he call it redemption? I started going through my family history. My grandfather was a chaplain in World War II. My father was a hematologist. I was a surgeon. We were all healers. Was it a lineage thing? Or was it all of humanity? I needed more data. I needed to find another one. I spent the next week monitoring police scanners, ham radio frequencies, obscure forums on the dark web. I wasn't sleeping. I was drinking coffee and staring at the slide, watching the battle between biology and whatever that thing was. I realized that if the government knew, they would weaponize me. They would drain me dry to build bombs that could wipe out a civilization we hadn't even officially met yet. I was a walking biohazard to an entire species. The weight of that is heavy. It sits on your chest like an anvil. Then, 4 days ago, I got the signal. A shortwave burst, encoded but repeating. Coordinates. It was close, only 40 miles north, a ravine near the state park. I packed my kit. I took the samples. I took a weapon this time, a .45 caliber handgun I kept in a safe. Not for them. For me. If I was captured, I wasn't going to be a lab rat. I drove out. The night was overcast. The air pressure was dropping. I could feel the electricity in my fillings. I hiked into the ravine. The terrain was rough, shale and limestone. I slipped, cutting my hand on a rock. I watched my blood drip onto the stone. It looked so ordinary. I wrapped it. I found the second site. This one wasn't a crash, it was a landing. The craft was intact, it was hovering a few feet off the ground, silent, a monolith of matte black metal. A ramp was down, and they were waiting. 3 of them, taller than the first one. They wore robes, not flight suits. They looked like judges. They didn't move as I approached. I stopped 20 feet away. I held up my hands. "I just want to understand," I said. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. 140 BPM, easy. The center one stepped forward. Its mental voice was different, colder, more analytical. "The carrier approaches. You have polluted the soil with your presence." I tried to help, I said. "Intent is irrelevant. The biological reality is absolute. Your genome is a scar on the continuum." "Tell me what the code is," I demanded. I felt a pressure in my frontal lobe, a headache spiking instantly to a level 8. "The code is the anomaly of mercy. It is the defect that allows you to survive your own destructive nature. To us, it is a corrosive acid. We seek to excise it." "Excise it?" I asked. "From me?" "From the planet." The threat was clear. They weren't here to explore. They were here to sterilize. And I was the pathogen, or rather my humanity was. I realized then that the code of redemption wasn't a compliment. It was a diagnosis. We are a species that forgives, that loves, that sacrifices. And to a race built on pure logic and efficiency, that is a cancer. I looked at the 3 beings. I looked at my bandaged hand. I knew what I had to do. I ripped the bandage off. I squeezed my hand, letting the blood flow freely. I flicked it towards them. A few drops hit the leader's robe. The reaction was immediate. Smoke, hissing. The creature shrieked, a sound that wasn't sound but a psychic tear. It stumbled back, clutching its chest. The robe dissolved. The grey skin underneath bubbled and blackened. I had burned it with my own essence. The other 2 stepped back, fear emanating from them in waves. I held my bleeding hand up like a holy symbol. "Leave," I said, "or I will bleed on all of you." They retreated. The ramp hissed up. The craft shot into the sky, silent and fast, leaving a vacuum that popped my ears. I stood there, bleeding, victorious and terrified. I realized the war had started, and I was the only soldier with ammunition. But as I walked back to the car, I felt weak, dizzy. I had lost maybe 200 cc of blood, not enough to cause this level of fatigue. I checked my wound. The edges were black, necrotic. It wasn't healing. The exposure to their proximity had triggered something. My own immune system was turning on itself, or maybe their presence had activated a dormant sequence in my DNA. I got home. I looked in the mirror. The veins in my neck were standing out, black as ink. I took my temperature. 104 degrees. I was cooking from the inside. I went to the lab. I put my blood on the slide again. The red cells were changing. They were glowing. They were absorbing the hex structures I had saved from the first encounter. My blood was adapting. It was becoming more. I passed out. I woke up 12 hours later on the cold concrete floor. The fever was gone. I felt strong, too strong. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator upstairs. I could hear a dog barking 3 miles away. I looked at the microscope. The slide was empty. The glass had melted. I am changing. I am becoming the weapon I was afraid of. And I know they will be back. They have to come back. They can't leave a contagion like me alive. I have to be ready. I have to understand what I am. I'm recording this log because I don't know how long I have before I lose my mind or my humanity. If you find this, don't look for me. Burn this tape. And for God's sake, don't let them take your blood. Whatever you do, keep your blood inside you. It's the only shield we have. I can feel them in orbit. They are watching, they are calculating. But they made a mistake. They told me what I am. They named the poison. And now, I'm going to make sure they choke on it. I need to find the source. The first casualty mentioned a lattice. I need to find where the lattice is anchored. I'm packing the car. I'm going to the coordinates I found in the second craft's nav log. I managed to glimpse the projection before the ramp closed. It's a facility, a human facility, deep in the Nevada desert. Someone here knows. Someone here has been working with them. And if my blood is the key, then I'm going to open every door they have, whether they want me to or not. I just hope there's enough of me left to care when I get there. Because right now, looking at the black veins spreading up my arm, I don't feel like a doctor anymore. I feel like the plague. The desert doesn't look like sand anymore. It looks like a vast silica-based circuit board, humming with a frequency that I feel in the roots of my molars, a vibration that started somewhere near the Utah border and hasn't stopped for 600 miles. I drove non-stop, fueled by a slurry of caffeine and the terror of what's happening to my physiology. My right arm, the one I exposed to the entities, is now marbled with black necrotic streaks tracking up the basilic vein, bypassing the axillary lymph nodes and heading straight for the superior vena cava. I haven't urinated in 20 hours. I haven't felt thirst. My body is optimizing, recycling fluids with an efficiency that belongs in a desert lizard, not a human male. I pulled the Volvo off the highway onto a gravel access road, marked only by a rusted Bureau of Land Management sign. The coordinates from the alien navlog pointed here, to a depression in the earth, hidden by a ridge of sandstone. I killed the engine. The silence was absolute, heavy, pressing against the windows like water deep underwater. I checked my weapon. Chambered. Safety off. I checked my medical kit. Though I suspected standard trauma protocols were useless now, I injected myself with 30 milligrams of ketorolac for the pain in my arm. But my metabolism metabolized it instantly. I felt the relief wash over me and vanish in 3 seconds flat. I have forgotten the names of my parents, but I can recall the exact viscosity of the alien fluid. The facility wasn't a military base. It looked like a server farm, a low, windowless concrete block surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire and cameras equipped with IR illuminators. I approached on foot, keeping to the shadows of the rocks. My vision has shifted. I can see into the near-infrared spectrum now. The heat from the facility's vents looked like plumes of red smoke against the cold blue of the night. I didn't need wire cutters. I touched the fence with my bad hand. The black necrosis on my skin arced. A discharge of bioelectric energy, something my cells are now generating, surged into the metal. The camera closest to me sparked and died. The electronic lock on the gate clicked open. I am becoming a key to their technology, a biological override. I walked to the main door. No guards, just a biometric scanner. I pressed my black palm against it. The machine didn't read a fingerprint. It screamed. A high-pitched feedback loop, then the light turned green. It recognized the alien pathogen in my blood, not my human identity. I stepped inside. The air was scrubbed, sterile, smelling of ozone and formaldehyde, the scent of a pathology lab. I moved down the hallway, the rubber soles of my shoes squeaking on the linoleum. The layout was standard for a containment facility: negative pressure rooms, airlocks, decontamination showers. But the signage was wrong. No biohazard warnings. Instead, signs read Purification Protocol and Extraction Phase 2. I found a lab coat on a hook. I put it on. Camouflage. I passed a window looking into a clean room. What I saw made me stop, my breath hitching in a throat that felt lined with sandpaper. Rows of dialysis machines. High-flow, continuous renal replacement therapy units. But they weren't cleaning blood. They were harvesting it. There were humans in the chairs, pale, comatose, hooked up to central lines. The tubes running out of them were red. The tubes returning to them were clear. They were being drained, slowly, systematically replaced with synthetic saline and oxygen carriers. I entered the room. The technicians didn't look up. They were wearing full hazmat suits, heavily shielded. I walked over to a chart at the foot of a bed. The patient was a woman, maybe 30. The chart read, Subject 774, Status, Redemption Positive, Extraction, 85% complete. They were mining us. They were draining the people who carried the code. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I spun around, the 45 raised. It was a man in a suit, no mask. He looked tired, his eyes were bloodshot. "You shouldn't be here, doctor," he said. He knew who I was. "Put the gun down. Bullets won't stop the process." I kept the gun leveled at his chest. "What are you doing to them?" I asked. My voice sounded harmonic, distorted, like two people speaking at once. He looked at my black hand, then up to my eyes. "We're saving them," he said. "The code of redemption. It's a limiter. It's a genetic firewall that prevents us from ascending. The visitors, they offered us a trade. We give them the raw material, the code, which they need to destroy to secure their own safety, and in exchange, they give us the cure." "The cure for what?" I demanded. "For mortality, for emotion, for the chaotic mess of being human." He walked over to a console and typed a command. A screen illuminated. It showed a double helix DNA strand being dismantled, base pair by base pair. "They can't touch the code," he explained, tapping the glass. "It burns them. You saw that. So they need us to extract it. We are the refiners. We purify the human stock, remove the mercy gene, and what's left is pure, logical, immortal." I can hear the thoughts of the comatose woman. She is dreaming of a garden that is burning. I realized the scale of the treason. This wasn't an invasion, it was a harvest, facilitated by our own leaders. They were selling our humanity literally to buy a seat at the galactic table. "And you?" I asked. "Are you purified?" He smiled, a cold, dead expression. "I was the first." "It's quiet, Doctor. No guilt, no fear, just clarity." I looked at the woman in the chair. She was dying, not from the blood loss, but from the spiritual vacuum. They were hollowing her out. "My blood kills them," I said, "and it's killing me." "No," he corrected, "it's not killing you. It's concentrating. You are an anomaly, a hyper-concentrated vessel. You are becoming the code incarnate." He took a step closer. "That's why you're here. We didn't lure you to kill you. We lured you to put you in the centrifuge." He pressed a button on his belt. The doors to the room hissed shut. The magnetic locks engaged. "You are the motherlode," he said. "If we drain you, we can buy the safety of the entire planet." I pulled the trigger. The bullet hit him in the sternum. He didn't fall. There was no blood, just a puff of white dust like dry plaster. He looked down at the hole in his chest, annoyed. "I told you," he said. "I'm cured." He lunged at me with speed that wasn't human. I sidestepped, instinct taking over, my movements fluid, faster than thought. I pistol-whipped him, but it felt like hitting a statue. He backhanded me, sending me crashing into a dialysis machine. Glass shattered. Alarms screamed. I lay on the floor, gasping. I saw a tube of the woman's extracted blood on the floor, leaking. I grabbed it. I scrambled to my feet. The cured man was advancing. I uncapped the tube. "This is the poison, right?" I shouted. "This is what you're afraid of?" I threw the blood in his face. It wasn't the glowing alien slime, it was deep, rich, human red. It hit his eyes. He screamed. A real scream this time. The human blood acted like acid on his purified skin. It sizzled, eating through the synthetic shell he had become. The code of redemption. It wasn't just toxic to the aliens, it was toxic to the traitors. It was the antidote to their emptiness. He fell to his knees, clawing at his melting face. I didn't wait. I ran to the console. I needed to open the doors. I needed to stop the extraction. My hands flew over the keyboard, my brain interfacing with the logic of the system intuitively. I initiated an emergency flush. The timeline in my head has split. I remember dying here, and I remember escaping. The machines reversed. The clear fluid stopped pumping. The red blood began to flow back into the patients. The alarms grew louder. "System purge imminent," a computerized voice announced. I unlocked the main doors. I ran back to the hallway. I needed to get out before the facility went into lockdown. But as I reached the exit, I felt a massive seismic shift. Not the ground, the air. The pressure dropped to near vacuum. I looked up. The ceiling of the hallway was dissolving. The roof of the facility was being peeled back like the lid of a sardine can. Above us, filling the entire sky, was the ship. Not the small scout I saw in the woods. A capital ship, a city hanging in the clouds. A beam of blue light hit the facility, focused on the lab I just left. It was vaporizing the evidence, vaporizing the cured man, and it was sweeping toward me. I sprinted for the Volvo. The heat was scorching the back of my neck. I dove into the car, jammed the key in and floored it. The shockwave hit the rear bumper, lifting the car's back tires off the ground. I fought the wheel, dirt and rocks spraying, driving blind into the dark desert. I didn't stop until I was 20 miles away, hidden in a canyon. I got out shaking, my body vibrating with adrenaline, and the alien energy coursing through my black veins. I looked at the facility in the distance. A mushroom cloud of blue fire was rising into the stratosphere. They destroyed it. But they didn't get me. I looked at my arm. The blackness had spread. It was up to my neck now. I touched my face. I could feel the ridges of veins hardening under my cheek. I pulled the rearview mirror down. My eyes. They weren't human anymore. The sclera was gone. They were pools of shifting, iridescent violet. I am turning into something else. But not one of them. Something new. A hybrid of the code and the void. I reached into my pocket. I had grabbed a hard drive from the console before I ran. I plugged it into my laptop. It was encrypted, but my new mind saw the patterns in the chaos. I cracked it in seconds. It was a map, a global map. Hundreds of red dots. Extraction centers. They are everywhere. London, Tokyo, Buenos Aires. But there was one gold dot, located in the Antarctic, labeled Project 0 Point. That's where the lattice is. That's where they are anchoring their reality to ours. I closed the laptop. I know where I have to go. But as I looked at my reflection again, I realized the terrifying truth of my survival. I didn't survive because I fought back. I survived because the beam avoided me. They didn't miss. They let me go. And the file I just opened. The last timestamp wasn't from the facility. It was uploaded 5 minutes ago. From the ship. They gave me the map. They want me to go to Antarctica. The Drake Passage was a churning washing machine of grey water and ice, 30-foot swells smashing against the hull of the rust bucket freighter I had bribed my way onto. But I stood on the exposed deck in nothing but a t-shirt, the salt spray freezing instantly on the railing but steaming off my skin. My core temperature is holding steady at 108 degrees Fahrenheit, a hyper-metabolic fever state that should have denatured the proteins in my brain days ago, causing irreversible encephalopathy, yet my cognitive function has never been sharper, more crystalline, more terrified. I looked at my hands. The black necrosis had fully hardened into a chitinous, obsidian-like armor that extended up past my elbows and was creeping down my sternum. I tapped my fingernail against the steel gunnel, and it rang like a bell. I am calcifying, becoming a living geode, a biological fortress built to house the volatile weapon my blood has become. The crew avoided me, crossing themselves when I passed, whispering about the Diablo in cabin 4 who glows in the dark. They weren't wrong. In the absence of light, my veins pulse with a faint violet bioluminescence, a Cherenkov radiation emitted by the war happening in my bone marrow. I have forgotten the sound of my mother's voice, but I can hear the magnetic poles shifting. We made landfall at a research station that didn't exist on any public map, a black site tucked into the jagged shadow of the Vinson Massif. The cold here was absolute, a dry, crushing -60 degrees that felt like a lover's embrace to my burning skin. I walked off the ship and into the whiteout. The wind was a physical weight, a katabatic gale screaming down from the plateau at 80 knots, but I didn't stagger. My density has increased. My bones feel like depleted uranium. I walked for 6 hours towards the coordinates, navigating not by GPS, which was spinning uselessly, but by the pull in my blood, a magnetic yearning drawing me toward the epicenter. I found the entrance to Project 0 Point, buried under a glacial overhang. It wasn't a door. It was a thermal borehole, a perfectly circular tunnel melted through 3 miles of ancient ice. I descended. There were no stairs, just a smooth, spiraling ramp descending into the crust. As I went deeper, the air pressure rose. My ears popped, adapting instantly. I reached the bottom and found a cavern that defied geological logic. It was a sterile, metallic dome the size of a stadium, lit by the same cold, shadowless light I saw in the alien craft. But the smell was human. Coffee, sweat, machine oil. This was a joint operation. I saw technicians moving on catwalks, human scientists working alongside the grey entities. They weren't enslaved, they were collaborating. I moved through the shadows, my black skin blending perfectly with the dark machinery. I bypassed a security checkpoint by simply overloading the biometric scanner with a touch, frying its logic board with my bioelectric surge. I found the central observation deck. Below me in the center of the pit was the lattice. It was a towering, crystalline spire, pulsing with a rhythmic, low-frequency thrum that rattled my ribcage. It was driven deep into the bedrock, tapping into the planetary ley lines, or perhaps the magnetic core itself. And attached to it were thousands of pods, human pods. I zoomed in with my altered vision, my iris contracting like a camera shutter. Inside each pod was a person, suspended in that clear, viscous fluid. They were the batteries, the redemption-negative humans, the ones drained of the code. They were being used as processing power, their neural networks linked together to form a massive, organic supercomputer. I can remember the future where I die, and it looks like a shattered mirror. I realized the purpose of the facility instantly. They weren't just harvesting us, they were using us to calculate a solution. The Greys, these beings of pure logic, had hit a wall. They couldn't solve the equation of their own survival, because they lacked the chaotic variable of intuition, of faith, of redemption. So they built a computer out of human brains to solve it for them, but they needed clean brains. Brains stripped of the code. Brains that wouldn't forgive, wouldn't hesitate, wouldn't love. A hand grabbed my throat. Not a human hand, a grey. It had decloaked right behind me. Its grip was crushing, collapsing my trachea. I didn't panic. I didn't need air anymore, not really. I grabbed its wrist with my armored hand. I squeezed. The chitin plating on my fingers dug into its flesh. I felt its bones snap. It projected a psychic scream into my mind, a blast of white noise meant to scramble my cortex. I pushed back. I used the code. I channeled the anomaly in my blood, the sheer illogical force of human stubbornness, and I projected it back at him. Get out of my head. The alien's head exploded. Not physically, but mentally. It slumped to the floor, catatonic, its brain fried by the paradox of human emotion. I stood over it, gasping, my throat reforming, the cartilage knitting back together in seconds. I looked at the console it was guarding, a master control terminal. I stepped up to it. The interface was incomprehensible, a swirling fractals of light, but my blood knew. I placed my hand on the panel. The black necrosis on my skin flowed out like ink, merging with the machine. I saw the data. I saw the plan. They weren't trying to leave. They were trying to stay. The lattice was a terraforming engine. It was rewriting the quantum laws of Earth to make it compatible with their biology. And to do that, they had to delete the code of redemption from the planetary consciousness. They had to make mercy impossible. If they succeeded, every human being on Earth would become a sociopath, a cold, logical drone, perfectly compatible with their hive mind. My shadow has detached itself from my feet and is watching me from the wall. "Impressive," a voice said. I turned. Standing on the catwalk was a human. He was old, dressed in a simple white lab coat. He looked like a grandfather, kind, gentle, but his eyes were black pools just like mine. "We thought you would die in the desert, Doctor, but you metabolized the catalyst beautifully." "You're the architect," I rasped, my voice sounding like grinding tectonic plates. "I am the patient zero," he corrected. "The first one to see the truth. That pain is inefficient. That grief is a waste of caloric energy. We are helping humanity evolve, Doctor. We are cutting out the tumor of sentimentality." He gestured to the spire. "The lattice is almost charged. Once it reaches 100%, the broadcast begins. A global signal. It will suppress the redemption gene in every living human. Instant peace, instant order. No more wars, no more heartbreak. Just silence." I looked at the readout. 98%. "And the cost?" I asked. "The soul," he said simply. "A vestigial organ. We don't need it anymore." He smiled, and his teeth were made of the same black crystal as my skin. "You are the final component, Doctor. Your blood. It is so potent. It is the concentrated essence of everything we need to destroy. We need to feed you to the machine. Your death will be the final key stroke." He raised his hand. The catwalks vibrated. Doors opened all around the perimeter. Hundreds of greys stepped out, and behind them human soldiers. "Surrender," Patient Zero said. "Embrace the logic." I looked at the spire. I looked at the pods. I looked at the army surrounding me. I checked my internal inventory. I had 5 liters of blood in my body. 5 liters of the most toxic substance in the universe to them. 5 liters of pure, distilled forgiveness. I laughed. It was a wet, jagged sound. "You want my blood?" I asked, stepping to the edge of the railing, directly over the open core of the lattice. "You think you can process this?" I pulled the combat knife from my belt. "You calculated everything, didn't you? The energy, the mass, the resistance. But you forgot one thing about the code." I held the knife to my own throat, directly over the jugular. Patient Zero's smile vanished. "What are you doing? Stop him!" he screamed, his composure breaking. "How you forgot that redemption isn't just about saving others," I shouted, my voice echoing through the dome. "Sometimes it's about sacrifice." I wasn't going to fight them. I was going to overdose their machine. I was going to dump the entire chaotic, messy, illogical force of a human soul directly into their sterile processor. I sliced. The cut wasn't painful. It felt like opening a valve on a pressurized boiler. A sudden, euphoric release as the crimson jet erupted from my jugular, hot and bright, arching over the railing and plummeting into the exposed singularity of the lattice core. Time didn't stop, it shattered. I watched the drops of my blood fall in slow motion, each one a universe of memory, my wife's laughter, the smell of rain on hot asphalt, the sterile hum of the OR, the way a patient's hand feels when you tell them they're going to live. I am falling, but the floor is rising to meet me like a lover. The moment my blood hit the crystalline matrix, the sound was deafening. Not a noise, but a scream of reality being violently rewritten. The white light of the alien facility turned a violent, bruised purple. The thrumming vibration spiked into a screech that shattered every pane of glass in the observation deck. I hit the floor of the pit, my body broken. But I didn't die. I couldn't die. I was the epicenter. I watched as the lattice tried to process the input. It was designed for logic, for binary zeros and ones, and I had just fed it the infinite, irrational variable of grace. The spire turned black. Cracks raced up its surface like lightning bolts. The blue energy coursing through it curdled into a sickly red. Above me, on the catwalks, the greys were convulsing. They clutched their heads, their psychic network flooded with the raw, chaotic data of human empathy. They were feeling everything. All the pain they had dismissed, all the love they had excised, it was hitting them at once. They were weeping. Aliens, beings of pure intellect, were curled on the floor, sobbing with the crushing weight of sudden, unwanted emotion. Patient Zero screamed, his cured composure disintegrating as his black, crystalline skin began to weep human blood, his body rejecting the artificial evolution he had forced upon it. "It's too much," he shrieked, tearing at his own face. "It's too loud." The pods, the thousands of comatose humans, began to wake up. I saw the lights on their status monitors flip from redemption negative to restore. The red fluid in the tubes reversed, pumping life back into them. They gasped, thrashing against the glass, their eyes opening, confused, terrified, but alive. The facility was collapsing. The ice walls were melting, great torrents of slush pouring in. I lay in the center of the ruin, my blood pooling around me, not mixing with the alien fluid, but conquering it, burning it away. I felt my heartbeat slow. 1 beat, 2 beats, silence, but I wasn't gone. I was expanding. My consciousness was no longer tethered to the meat of my brain. I was in the machine. I was in the signal. The lattice had been charged to broadcast a suppression field, but I had hijacked the carrier wave. I pushed with everything I had left. "I forgive you." I broadcasted it. To the Greys, to Patient Zero, to the terrified scientists, to the whole damn world, a planetary wave of absolute, unconditional forgiveness. The lattice exploded. A shock wave of pure psychic energy blasted outward, punching through the ice, shooting into the ionosphere, and wrapping around the globe. I felt it hit. I felt a soldier in Ukraine drop his rifle and weep. I felt a banker in Wall Street stare at his screen and realize the hollowness of his greed. I felt a mother in Sudan look at her starving child and feel a surge of impossible hope. It wasn't a cure, it wasn't a fix, it was just a moment. A global moment of clarity where the static of hate cleared, and everyone for one heartbeat remembered what it meant to be human. Then the darkness took me. Recording start, date, unknown, location, redacted, subject, the donor. Is it on? Good. Look, I don't know how to explain this medically. The subject was recovered from the wreckage of the Antarctic site 3 weeks ago. He shouldn't be here. We found him encased in a cocoon of that black crystal. We had to use diamond drills to get him out. When we broke the shell, he was inside, intact. No scars, no necrosis. He looks like he's 20 years younger. But his blood work. God, his blood work. It's not O-negative anymore. It's not anything. Under the microscope, his cells don't have nuclei, they have light, literal photons trapped in a biological membrane. We tried to draw a sample and the needle melted. He hasn't spoken. He just sits there in the observation room staring at the wall. But the staff, everyone who goes in there comes out crying. Not sad crying, relieved. Like they just went to confession and the priest told them they were saints. We have guards quitting their jobs. We have scientists reconciling with estranged spouses. Just being near him, it fixes you. The Greys are gone. Their ships left orbit the moment the tower fell. They ran. They were terrified of the signal. But we're still cleaning up the mess. The governments are trying to cover it up, calling it a geomagnetic storm, mass hysteria. But people know. They felt it. That split second where the world stopped hating itself. And him? I don't think he's a doctor anymore. I don't think he's human. I think he's the bank, the blood bank. He's the reservoir for all the things we were about to lose. We're keeping him sedated, or trying to. But yesterday, he looked at the camera. Right at me. And I heard him. In my head. Clear as a bell, he said, "It's still there. The code is still there. Don't let them forget." And then he smiled. It was the saddest, most beautiful thing I've ever seen. We're moving him to a new facility tomorrow. Deeper, more secure. They want to study him. They want to weaponize the forgiveness. Typical, right? But I don't think they can contain it. I looked at the containment glass this morning. It's cracking. From the inside. He's leaking, man. He's leaking grace all over the place, and I think I'm going to let him out. End of log.